see it.
Okay, so this is a work in progress. I owe Bill and the True Story Circle guys out in New Mexico an update by Thursday. So this was a kind of a breakthrough process I had for dealing with perfection bias and procrastination, and this is applying the true storytelling process of reframing or restoring, I should say. So over here on the side, these are the formal steps in the true storytelling process. You start with something that is a problem or an opportunity, and you identify the problem as a character in the story. You just personify it, right? You make it a character. And then you externalize it from outside of whoever you think was the root cause. If it's you or somebody else, you just make it a third person. And then you put everything into that new character you've introduced into the ecosystem. Because it's personified, it actually represents a new variable in the situation. Because before it might have just been an environmental feeling or a tone or a mood or something that, some kind of spirit, a cold wind blowing across somebody's grave or something like that, and you can't really contain it. So the idea of characterizing and then externalizing is to put that into a character with boundaries and a motivation that we can observe from a bunch of different positions and get our arms around it. Then you sympathize with that character and look at it from not just the problem it's causing or the opportunity that it's blocking, but from a more positive approach. And then make some revisions to that character's script or the story arc or to the plot that allows you to get some traction, put that character in motion towards a better place. And then strategize how you might make little wow moments out of the initial progress that is getting made, and then you can build on that momentum. And then that leads you to developing a larger restory that incorporates some of those tentative first steps. And then you kind of publicize that in the form of making an artifact or telling somebody about it so that it locks it in and kind of keeps you on that pathway of changed performance through time. So that's sort of the structured approach to it. This was what spontaneously occurred to me in about a 20-minute visualization that has really helped me make a breakthrough on the book project this week. So this is what this was my effort in restoring from April 6th. So my going in story was that I was feeling a tremendous amount of frustration with inertia in my own organization. At first, the story started off with I was angry at Army University for not adopting the changes that I wanted them to make, and we'll see where this ends up. They were embracing my recommendations for change too slowly, and I noticed that I was not happy with my attitude towards the organization because my feelings about them were negative and were spilling over into cynicism, and it was beginning to affect my work with other people and on other projects. So I took this phrase, irritated by inertia, as sort of the motivation for a character that I was about to create. And in a moment, like getting hit with a wet fish, I invented this cartoon method, the absurdity method, I suppose. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to search for a character that had the qualities simultaneously of one who was irritated by inertia, but who at the moment was also going to be a character, a cartoon character, that I could simultaneously recognize was funny and innocent and eager and lovable and well-intentioned in their own way, although having that particular, like a character flaw or whatever. Even though that character was lovable, the central feature in that episode, their defining quality in the moment, was that that character, that cartoon, was going to be the living embodiment of a person irritated by their own inertia, so much that they became a caricature of themselves. And so the immediate image that came into my mind was the mad professor from Donald Duck, Ludwig von Drake, who's this little guy over here. And he's got that funny accent, almost like Victor Borge, and he's always, he can't ever get anything quite right, and the experiment's always blowing up on him. And simultaneously, and what I saw him in was almost in a cartoon where he was playing the role of Nero, fiddling while Rome burned, but it was in a cartoon kind of a setting. And so you could imagine if you replace that fat Nero with Ludwig von Drake in a Roman toga, fiddling and using Donald Duck expressions, and just can't get going, knows what needs to be done but can't get going. So I saw him now in a scene where he was dressed as Nero, and he was fiddling while Rome was burning and being frustrated with everybody else when it was clearly his issue. And then I adopted the how could I learn to feel empathy and sympathy for that character because of all these other qualities that I had already invested in him. I was already, by design, with a favorable relation in the long run, that once he could get out of this particular conundrum, he would be lovable. And so I flooded the zone with feelings of forgiveness and gratitude, like I always do when I'm trading, but then just learned to apply it directly to old Ludwig von Drake. I gave him forgiveness for any harm that his inertia might be causing or his inefficiency. And I also gave him gratitude for carrying my load about the inertia that I was feeling, because it was, by this time, I was already seeing that what I had here was I had just created a mirror to see myself in what was an externalized situation. And that I realized quickly that the irritation that I had externalized and vocalized, my irritation with the inertia of my organization, was simply a projection and a rejection of my own inertia, that I was not satisfied with the little progress I was making on the book, and it was causing serious harm. And I had not been just doing the essential thing that simply needed to be done. That's just write the fucking freaking book. And as in that moment of gestalt, when I realized that it was simply just what we reject in others is what we're seeing in ourselves at some level, I realized that I was angry at Army University, and it was easy to be angry with them rather than just taking the necessary steps to get my own inertia moving into a flywheel, which I know how to do. And so this week, since last Thursday, I have been cranking all the little pieces and components, and a lot of the energy and motivation for the weekend work, which was about 6 to 8 hours of really good lectures, was really to say those things in a way that I can transcribe and put into the text of the book, because they were all pieces and parts of the sections of the book that I've got to get finished. So I made major breakthroughs this whole weekend, and over the last couple of days getting these pieces written, and was able to just calm the team down a little bit. So yeah, I haven't forgotten. I am actually moving on it. To be fair, the book represents me trying to get the right tone on a 35-year career of building my brand, and doing it in such a way that it positions us exactly where I want us to be, with good ethics and and to pay tribute to Van and his work, but also to position all of us for another 20 to 30 years of leveraging that brand. So it was more than just crank any number of words and get it done. I was really mindful of wanting to do it correctly, and that drifted into inertia for perfection. So this little exercise of restorying turned out to be the crystallizing technique that allowed me to just let that get out of myself, put a name on it, to characterize it or cartoonize it. And the key moment, I think, was the design of the character as a cartoon, which allowed me to simultaneously have him embody a particular problem, the inertia, but also surround it with all those favorable qualities that made it easier to do the forgiveness and gratitude and see the irony and the silliness of it all, and just move on and get past that, have a good laugh, and just get going. And so as I've been going through the week, just having that picture of Ludwig von Drake and Nero on my screen just helped me kind of continue to crank while I was doing other things and not worrying about making it perfect as much as I had before. So that turned out to be a pretty important technique. It's one I'm sharing with the guys on Thursday to help them see the power of the true storytelling. And we have been emphasizing mostly the first two principles of true storytelling in our circles, and because they really are the basis of transformational insights, and those first two principles are acknowledging what is already there, and you can see that in the sense of embodying what was there, the inertia and the irritation with self and organization. All of that is there, and just simply putting a name on it. And then step two, or principle number two, making space for all the voices. And that was what allowed me to add other things like empathy, sympathy, forgiveness, gratitude, the positive qualities of that little character. And when we do those things, all the groundwork for transformation has been laid, but there's still miles to go before we sleep, and that has to do with principles 3, 4, and 5. Principle 3 being plot, in which you start fiddling around with the different elements of the plot, the story arcs, the characters, some of their motivations, and that's what you see in the restorying process, is what you do with all of that goodwill and energy and insight that is generated from steps 1 and 2. So you have to do something with that and do work in the world if you want to make changes that last. And so we've spent more time in our course dealing with steps 1 and 2, but it's also what you do with those pieces and parts and the insights that come. It's not just populating a to-do list, but it's figuring out how to actually get through our own inertia and start making those changes at last. So step 3 being restoring. Steps 4 and 5 have to do with timing and setting, and adding help along the way, and then finally the 7th step of reflection. So there are things that you do with the pieces and parts of the stories that we've been able to tease out and then reposition and rearrange. So some of that work has to be done as well, but that's what you do once you've gone through, which I think is the harder part, is the safety and the trust and the truth that emerges from principles 1 and 2. So anyway, that was my work in progress, making good progress on the book, and excited about where this can go, because that becomes a really important part of the certification course that they've asked me to write about how to facilitate this process. Because when you're the facilitator of one of these circles, you're sort of a sheep herder, a shepherd, where you're trying to protect the flock and keep them organized and move them to the grass and keep out the wolves and all that stuff, and have people live by the agreements. But there's also, what do you do with the stuff that is surfaced? How do you do that in an ethical manner? So by telling you my story of a way to do restoring that shows you true storytelling in action, in which I'm not giving you advice. I'm simply telling you the story of my own personal life about where these principles have helped me, and do with that story as you will, so that the people may thrive. So that's my work in progress for this week, and I'm going to hit the tone, and then I'm going to ask you to think about the word that bubbles up in your mind for the week ahead, and help us use that as a focusing lens for going forward.